Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Sportsbook Confidential. My name is John Sullivan, and I'm coming to you live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in Seneca Falls, New York. And this little show is to help you learn and grow as a sports bettor. Thank you for sharing part of your week with me. We got an interesting show today. We're continuing our football preview, so we're going to talk about the NFC North. And I think this is the division where I found the best value so far. We'll talk about that. It's a strange week in sports with the suspension of games due to social protests. And it's very difficult to handicap a game if you don't know if it's going to be played or not. I just have to be, frank about that. And with the hockey and the basketball and the baseball, it's really tough you don't know if players are going to play, if they're going to sit out if the teams decide to play. You really don't know what's happening. So as far as handicapping this week, I have two sports that I'm pretty sure are going to go off without a hitch, and one is the Aussie Rules Week 14, and the other one is NASCAR's Daytona Summer Race, the Coke Zero 400. I'm not sure if some of the drivers are going to protest, but I believe the race is going to go off on Saturday night. So we'll talk about those events. But before we do any of that, let's do what we always do and update my bankroll. And last week at this time, I was lamenting my 0-5 week. This week, I only won one bet, but it was a big one. It was actually the lowest odds of my picks, but Takuma Sato won the Indy 500 at 16-1. And that was a nice boost of $102 to the bankroll. I put a half a unit on each of these four drivers. We have Helio Castroneves -7, Alonso -7. Ed Carpenter in the Space Force car went out on the first lap -7. Each of those, Castroneves and Alonso, did have time in the top 5 and the top 10. There were cars doing very different strategies. It was a very interesting race, and whoever kind of caught the cautions right had the benefit. And Scott Dixon was probably the best car in the field, but Sato had the lead, and Dixon had to save fuel to finish the race, and he was not. Sato was 5, 6, 7 seconds ahead. They had a caution with 5 laps left, and that ended the race. They finished under caution. So great boost to my bankroll this week. That if you do the math, that's going to be a plus 81 to the bankroll, and that makes my new bankroll 511. Dividing by 30, as we always do, our bet sizes now went from $14 to $17 this week going forward. Boy, if I'd hit that race before my 0-5 week, we really would have had a nice bump. But that's the way it goes. You got to stay within those bankroll management guidelines. And so we're going forward with $17 bets, and we'll see what happens this week. So let's move on from betting to previewing some more NFL. And this week we're doing the NFC North. For those of you, this is going east to west. Detroit Lions, Chicago Bears, Green Bay Packers, and the Minnesota Vikings. So a lot of traditional NFL teams there, old school. The Vikings, I think, are were founded in 1960 or 61, but all of those other teams are old school NFL teams. Let's start with the Lions, and I've got the odds posted here to win the division plus 520, about 5-1. To win the NFC, almost 29-1, and to win the Super Bowl, about 56-1. So we're going to, for those of you that haven't followed my other previews, I talk a little bit about the skill positions to give you the names of some players you might want to look at for your fantasy teams. And then I talk about the overall, strategy or construction of the lineup and how I think it's going to play out. And if there's any value on wagers. So let's start. Is Matthew Stafford healthy? That is a question mark. Now, of course, he went out injured last year. Is he healthy from that injury? But not only that, he had what they call a false positive COVID test. He's a hardcore veteran now, and he has had flashes of brilliance of, being a consistent top 10 quarterback, has been surrounded by either a bad personnel or bad coaching. I feel bad for him. They haven't been able to put it together. And every year some prognosticator says this is going to be Detroit's year. Personally, I don't see it. But they are actually the longest shot to win this division at plus 520. So the betting markets think the competition for the division is going to be very close. Running back by committee, you've got DeAndre Swift, Kerryon Johnson, and Ty Johnson. That nobody has established a dominance in the running position. Now, that can be a good thing or a bad thing, having running back by committee. It all depends on how they structure their offense. Matt Patricia, of course, from the Patriots is the head coach, and he was a defensive coordinator in his days in New England. So we'll see what happens there. Now, they do have a great wide receiver combo. They're veterans. Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones Jr., and Danny Amendola. Unfortunately, they don't have a lot of depth. So maybe they find somebody new, a UDFA or a draft pick, to give them some depth. And, of course, the tight ends are question marks. Jesse Jones, formerly of the Pittsburgh Steelers, looks like he's going to be the starter by default. We don't really know what he will bring to the table. Something that concerns me is little depth on the left side of the offensive line. Of course, if you're a right-handed quarterback, the left side of the offensive line is your blind side, and that's where injuries and fumbles occur. Not good for the team. So if they stay healthy, everything's fine. But if there's an injury on that side of the offensive line, you really start to worry. Moving on to the defense, the top two middle linebackers are injured here. This concerns me as far as stopping a run game or a two tight end set with a short passing game, a West Coast passing game. That's a very important position on the defense. So is their replacement level, is it going to be near their starters? We don't know yet. Very deep secondary. And that's good for stopping a big play. But as I said before, can this D stop a good run game? And that's something that can be devastating in this division because the other teams all have excellent running backs. And if they're down by one score, if the other team can control the line of scrimmage and grind out an 8, 9, 10-minute drive, that puts the Detroit offense in a very desperate and predictable position. So, if somebody shines on offense, and this is a team, if they do get ahead by a couple of scores, they're in good shape. But if they get behind by a couple of scores, it's going to be tough. I don't see them competing for the division. I don't see them competing for a playoff spot. That doesn't say that they, Stafford couldn't put in a great year and they could finish 9-7, 8-8. I don't see any value in taking any of the wagers here. Hey, I've been wrong before, so we're all reading tea leaves here. I know some of you don't agree with some of my prognostications. So let's move on to the Bears. To win the division, plus 380. To win the NFC, almost 22-1. And to win the Super Bowl, 51-1. Will the real quarterback please stand up? You have Mitch Trubisky and you have Nick Foles. And both of these quarterbacks are coming off of terrible years. And Foles has won a Super Bowl, of course, with the Eagles. Then he went to Jacksonville and signed a big deal, and they couldn't drop him fast enough. Trubisky was a top 3 pick or top 5 pick, and the Bears put their future on him. He had improvement, and then his last year was his first real step back. This team had trouble scoring points, and they seem to have a lot of weapons. And I don't know if that is a coaching issue, an OC issue, offensive coordinator. If Trubisky, they found, a hole in his game. He can't make adjustments on certain reads, and he's been exploited by other defenses. Don't really know what that is, but that somebody has to take the reins here. And actually, from what I've read in training camp, it sounds like Trubisky has been better than Foles, which is really scary because that would mean that they're basically looking to be about the same as they were last year. Maybe Foles will help him mature. David Montgomery, the feature running back, may miss the first month of the season. He's going to be out 2 to 4 weeks. They just announced yesterday. And Tariq Cohen is the other back. Montgomery is kind of the heavy load between the tackles back. Tariq Cohen is the receiving back. A lot of sweeps, a lot of wide receiver sets for him. But that would make him a great fantasy option if Montgomery does miss a month, at least for the first month of the season. And you might be able to draft Montgomery lower and keep him stashed in your bench if you're a fantasy player for later in the season. No shortage of receivers. Allen Robinson, Ted Ginn, Anthony Miller, Patterson, Cordarrelle Patterson. All good receivers. Will they get the ball enough from these quarterbacks? That's the question. There's got to be some passing game, especially with their top running back out. There's got to be some passing game effectiveness this season. Otherwise, it's going to be a long year for Chicago. Jimmy Graham at tight end. He has moved from New Orleans to Seattle to Green Bay to now to Chicago. Does he have anything left in the tank? He's a big target. I give him that. I don't know if he's going to be that tight end touchdown machine that he was. Extremely deep offensive line, enough time for the quarterback. It seemed like Trubisky, his first season as a starter, that he had a lot of elusiveness, and then last season he did not. I don't know if injuries contributed to that or he was just exploited and he has a learning curve ahead of him. But the line is healthy. If it can do its job, hopefully the quarterbacks will have enough time to open up the passing game. Of course, the defense is the strength here. Obviously, Khalil Mack is a possible defensive player of the year candidate. He is just a beast. However, 2 starters on the IR, Roquan Smith, who is a linebacker that's almost as good as Khalil Mack, and Artie Burns, one of the starting quarterbacks, are on the IR. And I think Burns is going to be out for the year. Smith, I don't know. But that's 2 starters from a very good defense. So we'll have to see how the replacement level do. But I rate the defense down about 5 or 10% because of that. And you rate the relative strengths of all of these teams in the division. It doesn't seem like the Bears are going to compete for the division title unless one of these quarterbacks has an amazing season. And my betting money is on them not having an amazing season. So I feel like these odds are actually a little low, and I would stay away from the Bears. That doesn't mean they won't be competitive in games and won't win their share of games. Now, remember, just because I don't think a team's going to win the division, that doesn't mean I'm not going to bet on them during the year. You give me against the spread, you give me the right team at the right time, I'll bet on the teams expected to go possibly 0-16 if you're giving me enough points. It's all about finding the value, and I just don't see any value here. So let's move on to the Green Bay Packers. And to win the division, they are the second favorite at plus 183. To win the NFC, about 14-1. And to win the Super Bowl, about 34-1. And I did a preview on futures during COVID, a couple of months ago. And I previewed the Stanley Cup champions and the NBA champions and this World Series champions, seeing if we could find value now that everybody was stopped. And at that time, the Packers were 28-1, and I thought they were an awful good value. And now they're 34-1, which means they're even better value. So let's talk about the team a little bit, and I'm going to tell you why I think this is an amazing value. So the first question is, more Rodgers-LaFleur magic. Matt LaFleur, the head coach in his second season with Aaron Rodgers. They went 13-3 last year with a relatively nondescript wide receiver core. They had a good running game with Aaron Jones and a solid defense, a defense that was good at stopping the run. And the team is pretty much intact with one exception, and that's Davante Adams opting out. I'm sorry, Devin Funchess opting out. So is there going to be more Rodgers and LaFleur magic? I think there is. I really do. I think this team did not take any steps back in the offseason. They, a lot of people think they didn't have a great draft, but they're basically all back. And it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. So Aaron Jones is the feature back. Hopefully he stays healthy because he's going to be pretty much an every down back. As I said, Devin Funchess, this number 2 wide receiver, opts out for the season, leaves Davante Adams and Allen Lazard as the other 2 remaining top 3 wide receivers. And you have Sternberger and Mercedes Lewis as the tight ends. So I can see Mercedes Lewis playing a lot of slot. They have a couple of depth receivers, Valdez Scantling, if I butchered his name, but he'll probably be the wide receiver 3. You have the offensive line at 100% strength right now, no injuries, everybody healthy. They've done a great job of protecting Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is one of the smartest quarterbacks in the league. He runs when he has to. He avoids hits all the time. He very rarely puts himself in bad spots. I would expect that when his career is over, he is going to become a coach in some level if he wants to. He is easily one of the better in-game managers. Brady is up there as well. But I think Rodgers is the best. I think he's the smartest quarterback in the league. On the defensive side, the 3-4 line, the 3-4 defense, the defensive line is exceptional. Huge guys up front, great at stuffing the run, great at getting pressure on the quarterback. This is the unsung hero of the Packers last season, and nobody talks about it. They just talk about the offense. This team, granted, they got lucky in the division with Minnesota focused on running the ball last year, and then Chicago having their problems last year, and Detroit having their problems with Matt Stafford last year. So they did get a little lucky in the division, but they still had to play a tough schedule. Quarterback Jair Alexander possibly out. He's injured. One starting cornerback, but the rest of the defense is completely intact. So this defense was really the shining point of the team last year, and the offense just did enough to get it done. And, they're back. This team is put together for a Super Bowl run. And everyone is talking about the draft. They're so miffed about the Packers drafting Jordan Love in the first round. And I have 2 schools of thought on that. Number one is they may be drafting him for a Taysom Hill type of position, wide receiver, running back, H-back, plus backup quarterback scenario. Now, I have no idea why they drafted him as high as they did, because they probably could have got him a round or 2 later, but there was a reason. And this team is smart, and I think Aaron Rodgers had some input. I'm guessing. I have no evidence to say it, but you've not heard one peep out of him about the draft or complaining about this team. He is on the same page with the coach. So whatever they're brewing, I think it's going to be a surprise, and I think it's going to be a good mix. My other school of thought on Jordan Love is that they want to bring him in and slowly transition him into starting positions. Obviously, Brett Hundley was not the answer as the backup for them. They need, Rodgers is basically going to say, I need a blow now if I'm going to keep playing for a few more years. And they need somebody to come in certain situations. And maybe they're doing, a CFL type of thing with short yardage sets where they bring him in and he can run or throw. Something Rodgers just doesn't want the grind of doing anymore. So who knows? But I look at this team and I see value all day. I see a team, of course, if Rodgers gets hurt, it's all blown to pieces, but that's the risk you take. with any wager you're going to make. But assuming Rodgers is healthy, assuming that most of the skill positions stay healthy, Aaron and Aaron, this team is definitely a Super Bowl contender. And as I've talked about winning the Super Bowl, it's all about who's going to get the bye in the NFC or in the AFC. And we've covered almost all of the NFC teams. I do not think anyone in the NFC East is going to get a bye. I feel like the West is too competitive. The South is too competitive. I feel like the Green Bay Packers have a real shot here to cruise in this division and get the bye, which means they would play home in the divisional round and they would play home in the NFC Championship. So if they just make it to the Super Bowl, you can hedge out your bet and lock in a nice profit. And it's still 34-1 as we speak today. So of all the teams we've covered so far, this is my favorite bet on futures for the NFL season. Now, everybody's in a state of flux with protests and business models, and some teams have canceled their seasons, and other teams have postponed them, and other teams are playing on and off, other leagues, excuse me. So obviously you are taking a risk. Make sure that your sportsbook has the rule about if they cancel the season, if you get your money back or not, But I see a lot of value there, just like I saw a lot of value on Takuma Sato last week. He was starting in third place, and he was a hair behind, a thousandth of a second behind the other two drivers. And I'm like, why are his odds 4 times as high? That's all I'm looking for. That's all we're doing here is looking for value, finding value bets and taking our chances. So the Green Bay Packers really impressed me, and I know some of you probably won't agree with that, but let's move on to the Minnesota Vikings, and they're going to be the main competition for Green Bay. They are actually the betting market favorites to win the division at plus 146. To win the NFC, about 12-1. To win the Super Bowl, just under 25-1. Kirk Cousins likes it. He's famous for saying, "You like that?" And he's been pretty good. I think he's been good for the locker room in Minnesota. I wonder if he's the quarterback that can get them to a Super Bowl. He is definitely a top 15 quarterback. He's a good leader. I don't know if this mix is right. I don't. But they have the best running back in the division in Dalvin Cook, and the big question is can he stay healthy? I don't think he's played a full season yet. He was able to come back for the playoffs, and that helped them to win a playoff game against the Saints, I believe. But will he get a full season in? And their passing game really thrives off the run game, and that's what they did last year. They concentrated on the run, and they had trouble running the ball. I believe Amir Abdullah is the second string running back here. And if Dalvin Cook misses significant time, their running game is shot, and they're going to be another very predictable team. Adam Thielen, B.B. Johnson, and Jefferson are the wide receivers. Kyle Rudolph is the tight end. He's a red zone threat. He's a great tight end for fantasy because when they're in the red zone, they always look to him. The offensive line scares me. Kirk Cousins does a pretty good job of avoiding hits, but there's right now on the depth chart, there's one center, one left guard, and one left tackle. They're all healthy, but if there's trouble on that side of the line, injuries happen, that would concern me. So if you're looking at games and there's injuries in those positions, you might want to consider going against Minnesota, depending obviously on the opponent and the spread. The draft pick, Odenigbo, may be out for a significant period of time. He is expected to start at defensive tackle. And the starting off outside linebacker Barr and cornerback Hughes are out. This is the defense. They gave up a lot of big plays last year, and you wonder with the outside linebacker and the cornerback both being out, if that exposes the passing game to sideline routes and forces the safeties to cover sidelines more, and that would create an opening in a post pattern, people over the middle deep. So we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting to see how the team stacks up. Maybe whoever comes in their place has, an all-pro season. We don't know. But this defense, I say this a lot. This team can't give up the big play. This defense cannot be exploited for big plays. Because Minnesota has not had a quick strike offense for a couple of years, and Stephon Diggs want it out. He wanted to get, he went to the Bills, who has the player with the best deep arm in the league. Not to say that he's going to be Josh Allen's going to be that accurate, but this is a team that if it can't respond with a big play, it's going to be trouble for Minnesota. I feel like this team is incomplete. I think if they had a couple more pieces, more depth at running back, maybe a new big receiver comes into the mix and shines, which could happen, then yes, they're going to be on par with the Packers. But Rodgers has too much experience. I think LaFleur is a very innovative coach in Green Bay. I favor them over the Vikings. But they're the betting favorites to win the division. If they stay healthy, they're definitely going to be competitive. But I feel like they're just one or two extra injuries short of being the number one team in the division. So that's how I feel about the NFC North. I feel like of all the teams I've covered so far, Green Bay is the team most likely to get the bye, get the home games in the playoffs, and get to the Super Bowl. And just extreme value there. So let's move on real quick. We're going to do Aussie Rules, Week 14. I think they have about 3 or 4 weeks left. I thought they were going to end the season in September, but they've decided to end the season in October. So we still have some regular season games. It's a little bit of silly season. A lot of teams are out of it, have extensive injury lists, and there's a question of effort. And the Sydney Swans at the Port Adelaide Power is a perfect example of that. Port Adelaide, 30.5-point favorites. Sydney has massive injury list, and there's a lot of young talent that is getting their first significant playing time. So the question is, does Sydney even try here because they're not playing for anything? And, they have shortened quarters. Instead of 20-minute quarters, they have 16-minute quarters. 31 points is a lot of points to cover. That's 5 goals plus. So the question is, does Sydney try? Do their young players want to shine? They're playing the best team in the league. It's just a game I'm going to stay away from. But, when a spread gets that big, I lean towards taking the points because, if the weather turns out to get bad, that is going to make scoring very difficult. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't bet on this game just to have action on it, but that's where I'd lean. Great Western Sydney at the Fremantle Dockers. Dockers have been decimated by injuries all season. Great Western is in position to compete for a playoff spot. Big game for them. 9.5 is a lot of points. It's more than a goal, but less than 2 goals. I like Great Western Sydney here to get the job done. Win by 10. I feel like, if the game gets out of hand in the second half, they're just going to kind of play it out. St. Kilda at Melbourne. This one I feel like is, this is very important for two teams trying to make the playoffs. I feel like it's lined appropriately. St. Kilda getting minus 3.5 for St. Kilda. Melbourne, this game is not in Melbourne, but these teams are very even in their style of play, in their metrics. The numbers say that this is a pick'em game. Melbourne has fewer injuries, I think, than St. Kilda. St. Kilda's a couple of points better. It's lined very appropriately. Collingwood Magpies at Carlton Blues. Collingwood is another team that's decimated by injury. They started out the season so well. Carlton has played everybody tough, but they're a young up-and-coming team. They don't know how to finish sometimes. They've played a lot of close games. If I looked at the stats, they've given up the exact same amounts that they've scored this season, which is, they've just played a lot of close games. Some win, some lose, and it's tough. If they were getting 10 points, I'd be all over Carlton, but I just can't in this game. It's kind of a pick 'em game again. I just don't like either side there. Then North Melbourne Kangaroos at the Gold Coast Suns. Gold Coast is much improved this year. North Melbourne is the most decimated team this season of the 18 teams in the AFL. I like Gold Coast at home here. 8.5 is not a lot of points for them to cover. They have outside shot at a playoff spot. The numbers say that they're 10 points better, my numbers. So I like them a lot. We'll talk about which games I like in my picks in a moment. But before we do that, let's take a quick look at the Daytona NASCAR race Saturday night under the lights. The Coke Zero 400, they used to call it the Firecracker 400. They moved it to night about 10 years ago for one reason, just because it's not as hot, but they like the prime time slot. So the Daytona 500 winner, Denny Hamlin, is the favorite at plus 600. Best average finish at all the plate tracks since 2017. That includes Talladega and Daytona. John Hunter Nemechek, Eric Almirola, Ryan Newman, even though he had that huge crash at Daytona, and Denny Hamlin. Best average finish at Daytona since 2017. Ryan Newman again, John Hunter Nemechek, Michael McDowell, and Denny Hamlin. And the best teams at Daytona since 2017, Petty Racing, Roush Racing, JTG, and Childress. You notice the big teams, Gibbs, Hendrick, Stewart Haas are not there. It's because it's a restrictor plate race, and everybody's on an equal footing engine-wise. So it's all about drafting, and it's all about pit stops and avoiding the big wreck. So there are a lot of, I don't have the odds listed. I can't show you. There's a lot of good value. So check out the odds for this race. You'll see, I think Logano is 11-1. Eric Jones from Gibbs is 25-1. Harvick's 8-1. And I've got a few picks. We'll go right to my picks, and we'll see what I took. So for Aussie Rules, I'm going to take the Great Western Sydney Giants minus 9.5 at minus 111. And the Gold Coast Suns on Sunday, minus 8.5, minus 111. We'll see how that works out for me. In the Daytona race, to win, I'm going to take Truex at 18-1 for Gibbs. Almirola, he showed up on all my metrics at 20-1. He has not had a win in a while, but this is the kind of race where you can win. It's going to be, a dozen cars trying to pass each other on the last lap. Eric Jones, who won one of the qualifying races this year at Daytona, 25-1. And I'm going to take John Hunter Nemechek in the top 10 bet at plus 275. Now, half unit on all of those bets in the Daytona race. Nemechek's worst finish in a restrictor place race is 12th. That's the worst he's finished in 3 restrictor plate races. So a top 10 for him is about over 50%. So I'm hoping that pans out. So that's it for this week's wagers, and that's it for this week's show. I want to thank you for watching and spending some time with me today. And hopefully we'll have a better idea of when all the sports are going to go back to their regular schedules. And hopefully we'll have the NFL in 2 weeks from yesterday. So I still have enough time to do the rest of my previews. So tune in again for another one next week. And I'm going to play the outro music for you. So I hope you have a great weekend. Take care, everybody. Let's get some winners.